I'm here today to share with you guys a video that is pretty highly requested, and it's basically just, like what do I feed my kids? How do I avoid having, really picky eaters? How do I help them through those picky moments? And just in general, what do they eat? And this is beyond like introducing solids and how to kind of navigate that whole world, which I can totally do as a separate video if you guys are interested. This is kind of like what I feed my kids now. They've gotten beyond that whole like testing out new foods like mushy peas and mushy basically everything. Now these tips aren't going to necessarily work for everyone, totally get it. Every kid is a little bit different. Some have aversions to certain textures and tastes, and that'll evolve as they grow too. But this is what's worked for me and for my kids, so hopefully it works for you guys too. Leave a comment down below with your tried and true tips and tricks and meals and things like that that have worked for you when your kids are having a more picky moment. Give this video a big thumbs up if it helps, and don't forget to share it with other moms out there that might also benefit from this video. I really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into this. So before I get into like the breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, tips, that kind of thing, I want to kind of give you guys like a background on sort of what their eating has been like and the preferences and things like that. So with Julia, she was a pretty consistently easy eater. I was really lucky with that. She ate a lot of blended foods longer than Luke. That worked really well for us for a long time. Luke kind of bypassed the whole mushy food phase almost entirely. He was not having any of it. He was okay with like yogurt, and he was good with breads and good with that kind of stuff, but like mushy anything that was like carrots or like mushy, when you have to like blend up chicken, which is a super fun process. He was just not into it. He really wanted to eat by himself. He was much more independent, and so I kind of had to change up my methods a little bit with him. Luke really likes bread. That's what he loves, and that's about it. He will eat other things and he enjoys other things, but like that's his go-to. That's the peak of the meal is when bread gets involved. He is more of a picky eater than Julia ever was. Julia loves fruits and vegetables. Really her only picky things that she's not really in love with is like chicken and any sort of meats. Each of them have had really picky moments. They have foods they like, they have foods they don't like. I think that's pretty common for anyone, regardless if they are adult or child. So I do my best to kind of accept those moments and not make a big deal out of them, but I'll get into all of that and more like the tip stuff near the end of this video. But yeah, that's sort of the background of my two children and their eating habits. So now we'll get into the actual meals and what we tend to feed them each day. So starting with breakfast time, I try and offer them sort of two options, and like that's it. Like otherwise it becomes a nightmare and breakfast isn't over until like 11. So they will both start out with fruit. So I'll cut up a whole bunch of fruit: pears, bananas, apples, grapes, berries, pretty much anything, whatever we have that's in season. I will chop it all up and they'll have that with some milk, and I'll put some probiotic powder into both of their milk, and then that's sort of what they start with. And then usually my options are like if Chris and I are doing scrambled eggs obviously are an option. Another option is usually like an English muffin with almond butter and a little bit of jam, or like sliced bananas on it or something like that, or like cereal. That sort of tends to be where breakfast is sort of at. Both my kids had big oatmeal phases when they were a little bit younger. We would throw pears in there, or bananas and cinnamon, or apples and maple syrup, or like berries or something like that. There were a lot of different options, and there's so many different ways you can add some really nice things to oatmeal, and it's a pretty easy meal. So that was our go-to for a while, but sadly both of the kids have they're kind of over the whole oatmeal thing right now. Hopefully we'll get back into it by the time they go to school. Then on to lunch, since both of my kids tend to wake up a little bit on the later side than most kids. Usually by 8 to 8:15 they're downstairs for the most part. So then we'll roll into lunchtime, and lunchtime for whatever reason is sort of this mishmash kind of a meal. It's sort of like a big platter kind of a thing. So we do a mixture of whatever was leftovers the night before, and then I'll do a variety of meats and cheeses and vegetables and grains and things like that that I know that the kids really enjoy and are pretty easy to kind of offer them. So whether it's cucumbers and cherry tomatoes, some Baby Bell cheese, that kind of thing, with some crackers, something like that, or some naan bread and Havarti and some leftover like chicken from the night before, and just like stuff like that. That's sort of been our go-to. And for me, it just allows me to have the flexibility of filling up their plate with the things that they really love, but it gives them a wide range within sort of their meal. So Julia, she loves fruits and vegetables, so she'll fill up on cucumbers and cherry tomatoes, majority of which is on her plate, and she'll have a little bit of cheese and some chicken or something like that, but she needs to be able to finish everything on her plate. But then I can like fill her up with the things I know she loves, but also she has kind of a wide variety at her disposal. For snacks, I try and keep it pretty straightforward, and we offer sort of a like 5 different types of snacks each day. So there's hummus and cucumbers, some various form of fruit and some almond butter, cheese and crackers and grapes, trail mix. That's pretty much it in terms of what we offer them. It also depends on what time they wake up from nap. If they wake up really late and we're like getting ready for dinner, then they'll have like a nice cup of milk and maybe some grapes or a little bit of cheese or something just to tide them over until dinner time. But that tends to be the offering, and they're pretty happy with that. And then dinner time is always a family meal. So we will always eat the same type of meal together, and everyone eats the same thing, except when they're a little bit younger and they're still being introduced different types of solids and stuff like that. But other than that, everyone eats the same thing. There's always a vegetable, there's always a carb, and there's always a protein in general for each of the meals. Yeah, that tends to be the way it goes. Chris does a lot of the cooking, so it's sort of, you know, testing out different recipes and trying different techniques. But I know that in general, if I find it really tasty and really good, then so will my kids. So I try and make things that taste delicious, which I guess is kind of the goal. Now on to some tips and tricks and things that have worked really well for me in sort of the process of navigating this whole world of, you know, them exercising their independence and their desire to say no to everything. So the first thing is getting them involved in the food preparations. This is huge for me, and I still remember, like Julia, our first food that we fed her was avocado, and she hated it. And every time after that I tried to introduce avocado to her, she'd always be like, no thank you. I tried guacamole, I tried straight avocado, I tried it with a little bit of salt and pepper, nothing ever worked with her. And then what I did is I put it all into the bowl, and she liked to watch me cook, and I would sort of like chop up everything and I'd show her all the pieces or whatever. And then I remember bringing the masher over with the bowl to her and having her help me to mash all the ingredients together. And I just watched her eyes go really wide, and she's watching this whole process. And then I took a spoon while she was still looking at it and gave her some of it. Game changer. From that moment on, and that was what, when she was like 1 and a bit, she's obsessed with guacamole. Getting them some way involved in the cooking process has been really huge for us, whether it's them kind of stepping up on the step stool and watching us cook, or it's, you know, taking all the pre-chopped stuff and putting it into a bowl, or bringing them over so they can see all the stuff being cooked. Just stuff like that has been really helpful for us, and it helps them to understand what they're eating. They enjoy it a lot more because they were, you know, part of the process. They can see where it came from and how it got to where it is, and it's just made our lives a lot easier. The second tip works really well for us, and I get it's not going to work for everyone, but we try not to cook a lot of foods that I know my kids don't like. And I know that seems overly simplified, and it's like, well, yeah, well, what if your kid hates everything? I get it, I totally get it. But for example, Julia isn't a big fan of chicken. So instead of just giving her chicken breast with like salt and pepper on it, I will try and, you know, roll it in different types of breadcrumbs and some seasonings, or we'll have some dips with it, or the way I'll cut it into little pieces that she can pick up and use as like little like chicken nuggets. Stuff like that, like just finding ways to make foods that we already eat more enjoyable for everyone. Just, it works really well for us. And you know, I just won't make a lot of meals that I know they don't particularly enjoy. So for example, they don't like pizza. I know. Even Luke, I remember putting the pizza like in front of him, and I'm like, it's bread, buddy, it's bread. And he's like, no, thank you. Ridiculous. We also tend to use Julia's play kitchen a lot. So for Luke and for Julia, I guess it's both of their kitchen now, isn't it? But what we'll do is when we're playing, we'll pretend to make particular meals. And so if we're, you know, cooking chicken tonight, if Chris is cooking, for example, then Julia, Luke, and I will be in her kitchen and we're preparing the meal. So we're putting the rice onto the stove and we're pouring the water in and like doing all those processes and having Julia pretending like she's making dinner. She loves it. She loves being involved in it. We'll make dessert after, and just like just bringing their imagination to the forefront has been a really fun thing for us, and it's a great way to interact with them, and they enjoy it, and it's a lot of fun. We can bring out the spatulas and some of the like cooking utensils and measuring spoons and stuff like that, and it's just really fun, and it again helps them to learn the whole process of cooking and what's involved in the food that they eat. Another tip is, and I referred to it before, is I have sort of an inventory in my head of the healthier foods that I have a sense of what each of them likes. So Julia's really easy, fruits and vegetables, that's sort of her game, and I know what she likes. I'm still figuring out Luke a little bit in terms of the fruits and vegetables realm, but I tend to know, for example, with tomatoes, he prefers cooked tomatoes. So for a meal, we'll do, you know, some cooked tomatoes, like we'll chop up a bunch of cherry tomatoes with some oregano or some Italian seasoning, some salt and pepper, olive oil, stuff like that, and I know he will love it. But then since I know he likes tomato, I'll try them raw, I'll try them with some Parmesan on them, I'll try them, you know, mixed in with pasta, like just like finding different ways of making the foods that they enjoy has been really great, and it's worked really well for us. Another tip is using dips. Dips make everything better. And they don't necessarily need to be unhealthy dips. You can make dips from yogurt, for example, and throw in various savory spices into it and make that a dip if that's something that they enjoy. You can find different ways and different hacks to making things that they enjoy dipping their food in, but kids like that sort of sensory experience, and offering that as an option to dip their broccoli, it does make the whole process a lot easier. Another thing is try not to offer snacks too close to dinner time. That I've noticed, like Julia got into a phase a little bit that she really loved snacks, or she'd fill up on milk before dinner time, and then she wasn't as hungry, so she didn't need to eat the foods that she didn't enjoy. And so now if she's hungry and it's like getting close to dinner time, like maybe it's some of the vegetables that I'm chopping up or something like that, she really loves that, or it's, you know, a piece of cheese or half a glass of milk or something like that, just making sure that she is satiated enough but she'll still be hungry for dinner. Finding that sort of balance is really important, so they're not going to continually fill up on snacks. Another thing that worked really well for us is we waited a long time to introduce sugar to Julia and Luke. And that's worked really well for us because neither of them kind of see it as a big deal, and they don't crave it. Julia enjoys it and will bring it out as a treat, and you know, she'll ask for, you know, a chocolate chip cookie, and I'll give it to her, and I'll not make a big deal out of it. That's another thing. I don't make a huge deal out of treats and things because I don't want them to see that as like the prize to be won. But when she asks for more, my usual go-to response is sort of like, too much sugar isn't good for little girls, and she's pretty okay with that. Julia's fairly logically based, so she likes to understand the reasoning behind why I said no, if that makes any sense. So that usually works for her, and she's like, all right, no more sugar, got it. And if they're still hungry, I will offer more dinner, or I will offer some vegetables or a glass of milk or something like that. But that way they understand that you should be filling up at dinner time or whatever meal it was, and if you're still hungry after, well, you can just have more of what you refused in the first place. I know this is kind of a silly one, but if the food tastes good to you, it will likely taste good to your kids too. So I remember Julia was like refusing food over and over again, and it was when we were still offering her sort of like the stew-esque type foods. And so I was like, this is weird. Like, so I tasted it and I was like, well, this is off. It's just there weren't enough spices in it. It just tasted kind of bland. And so I threw in some more spices. I added some more sweet potato to it, and she demolished it. And so for me, if it's like, oh, I find this is really tasty and I really enjoy it, then I know my kids will. So I try and season everything appropriately. Obviously not a ton of butter and salt, like I don't want them loaded up with that stuff, but just using, you know, herbs and spices and things like that. And introducing those herbs and spices early was really important too. I know that sometimes kids get offered a lot of blander options, and I find introducing those spices early was really important. So maybe try that and see if that works, or have them involved in the process of spicing up the food. Maybe it's as simple as putting together all of the spices and whatever and allowing them to like sprinkle it on top of their food. Something like that, just getting them used to different taste selections is really great. And then as much as you possibly can, stick to your guns. If they are leaving dinner and they're still hungry and they whine and complain and get snacks later, they're gonna keep playing that card. I mean, wouldn't you? If they say they're done dinner and they're not gonna eat anymore and they say they're full, okay, fine. But if they come back an hour later and they're still hungry, well then they can have a selection of the foods that they chose not to eat at dinner time. And giving them a number of bites to work towards also really helps. So if Julia has 4 more bites of chicken, that's something that she can kind of work towards, and that helps her to have a goal in mind in how many bites she knows she needs to eat before she can leave. And then lastly, use encouragement, especially when they're at a young age. Luke, for example, right now loves the encouragement that goes along with when he's eating foods he doesn't love. So, you know, if he eats a couple of bites of chicken, I'll like clap, and then Julia will get involved, and we'll all be clapping, and he gets so excited and he loves it. He loves the encouragement, and we'll do that we'll put a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables and some chicken on his plate, and he'll have to go through that. He's sort of trying to learn that process now. It's like you have to finish what's on your tray and then you can have some bread. And he trusts me now that if he finishes what's there, then he gets the bread after, and he's good with that. I think overall, setting the parameters in advance, being there with your kids while they're eating, and having interaction with them, talking with them, encouraging them, and being enthusiastic, and loving the food yourself. If you're eating the food and you're enjoying the food, they're gonna try and pick up on your enthusiasm wherever they can. And not every kid's gonna love everything. Every kid's gonna go through phases where they love something and they don't like something, and they'll go in and out of it. Do your best where you can. Every kid's gonna have picky moments, and if you have any questions or concerns, obviously talk to your doctor. I'm sure they have resources or alternatives that you can utilize to sort of boost up your kids' nutrition levels while they're still kind of learning to explore new tastes and textures and things like that. But these are the things that have worked really well for my family, and hopefully they work for you guys as well. That's everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see sort of the whole like introducing solids and the processes and methods and things like that that went into it for us, let me know in the comment section below, and by giving this video a big thumbs up. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new videos every Saturday. And that's everything. I hope you guys are having an amazing, amazing weekend, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Love you, girls. Mwah.